to work on upgrading the island's hidden stronghold, which looks like a complicated old mess when extracted from the world. I laid out all of the different rooms, sorting them by type, jumping into each one to make some epic upgrades, starting with that all-important portal room. For these upgrades, I tried my best to keep things really survival friendly with some resemblance to vanilla. Next, I tackled the library, bringing these huge stacked bookshelves, study nooks, and even a second level to explore. I of course had to finish up with a candle chandelier before quickly building some upgrades for the remaining rooms, and creating a staircase and corridor to connect all the rooms up. I then plotted out our shiny new stronghold, and to be honest guys, this place is an absolute maze. It's going to be so easy to get lost in here, and there are so many rooms to explore. As you can see, it's at least double the size of the original stronghold that you can see over there in the background. Even though I built this myself, I definitely still get lost in all of these winding corridors and staircases. And coming across dungeons like these when you're lost in what feels like the medieval equivalent of the backrooms is definitely super creepy. But you'll have to find it for yourselves, as I've hidden the upgraded stronghold somewhere in the USW, so get your ender eyes ready. And after at least 6,000 hours of hard work between Steph and I, we're on our way to the final transformation. Let's head through the end portal for our final major upgrade of the USW. Starting with the main end island, I made some improvements to the terrain to make things feel more realistic, using some of the floating islands I made for the Nether earlier to help me out a bit. I then had the idea to edit the obsidian pillars to house large crystals, perhaps fallen stars or larger versions of the end crystals that usually sit on top. It was a great idea in theory, but since the Ender Dragon has a tendency to destroy everything in its path, it didn't end up working out. I didn't want you guys to have a totally wrecked battleground to fight the Ender Dragon in, so instead I opted for something more organic and made something that suited the name Obsidian Spikes a little better. I think these clusters almost look like mystical shards from outer space that have kind of dispersed on impact with the island. And it's an added bonus that the Ender Dragon can't mess these up. Since I couldn't incorporate the crystals into the pillars themselves, I thought it'd be cool to add some crystals around the island instead, to perhaps show where Minecraft's end crystals originally came from. The original island is so bare and I didn't want to deviate too much from vanilla, but I think this addition definitely spices things up a bit. And finally, I created a mystical broken bridge, sort of inspired from the Bifrost Bridge from Thor, leading into the distance. This bridge once led to a giant floating city, and it's a big clue to let you guys know where to head in order to find it once you've defeated the Ender Dragon, since the end gateways will only lead you to the distant lands. So that leads us to the biggest transformation of this dimension, the End City. Now for this city transformation, we had a ton of ideas and suggestions. Could we make it into some kind of giant tree city, since the vanilla version sort of resembles a tree? Or perhaps something more like a futuristic space station? None of these ideas really felt right to us. The end definitely feels a little futuristic, but also very mystical and strange. So we wanted to capture all of that in our most creative design yet. So after all the planning, uncertainty, and a whole lot of sketching, this is what we came up with. We ended up with a very limited timescale to actually build this in, but I think it definitely captures the different themes of the end. The central pillar acts as a hub to the city and anchors 3 large ring systems made of mystical end dust. These rings will be home to our new end buildings, creating a multi-layered city like the original. There will also be a huge Ender Dragon statue snaking around the central pillar as a tribute to the dragon for protecting the city from outsiders venturing from the overworld. With only about 4 to 5 hours of building time for the dragon, and a big challenge ahead, I got started with the Ender Dragon sculpt. Now I know it would have been much easier to take a sculpt from the internet and import it into the world, and some people think that I've actually done this when they only see a picture of my organic builds. But honestly, a lot of the time you can tell when a model has been 3D imported, and it just doesn't look right. Plus, if I'm creating something for you guys, cutting corners just wouldn't sit right with me. So I've always invested the extra time in this project to keep it authentic and do as much as possible myself. You may only see the process for a few short seconds, but it's definitely worth it. Anyhow, creating the head on a straight axis wasn't actually too tricky for me, but the real challenge came when tilting the head down and turning it on an angle. Both of these things can really mess with the shape of something you created on a straight axis, especially for things like teeth, which are hard enough to build with square blocks as it is. but I managed to clean things up nicely before placing the head and creating a snake-like body, since this would be a wingless space dragon inspired by East Asian depictions, as opposed to a winged dragon. I painted the body in the colours of the original Ender Dragon, adding spikes down its back and ridges down its belly, before adding some arms and painting them to match the body. Also making some final tweaks to the head, using crying obsidian to add a glow around the face, as if the dragon is gearing up to breathe purple flames. I also added a glow to the mouth and some smoke coming from the nostrils, and at this point I was surprised I'd managed to build all of this in time. With the dragon mostly complete, besides a few little tweaks that you may notice appearing in the next few shots, I detailed the central pillar, adding some extra ring systems at the bottom and creating a huge spiraling parkour stairway up the middle to allow access to different levels. And finally, it was time to work on the buildings themselves. Steph and I wanted to keep this true to vanilla, but also more city-like with some mystical elements. We made these mini skyscrapers with the vanilla colour palette in mind, adding some mysterious glowing symbols to each building, inspired by the hex symbols used by Scarlet Witch in Marvel. We pretty much made up these symbols randomly, so if they accidentally look like anything from real life, it's completely unintentional. We also thought it'd be cool if the buildings were mirrored either side of the ring systems, defying gravity just like the vanilla End City does. So we did this for all of the buildings, creating the interiors as we went. We also made sure to create enough variants of the designs to keep things busy and dynamic, rather than just placing the same building over and over again. We made some small tweaks to the dragon, and then it was time to place all of our wacky buildings on the ring systems. We are so proud of this piece and how quickly we managed to put it together, and it definitely has to be our most unique creation to date. It will certainly be awesome to experience in game. I can guarantee you won't have explored anything quite like this before. And with our End City complete, I moved on to the End ships, which in vanilla, they kind of look like a basic galleon with a wacky colour palette. So with that in mind, I thought it'd be really cool to modify the galleon that we used in the overworld. Perhaps some of the fleet from the overworld took a wrong turn on the seas and fell into another dimension. Whatever your predictions on the lore, we thought a subtle nod to the overworld and everything we've been creating on the island for so long now would be a nice touch to wrap up the main transformations. I modified the colour palette to match the blocks found in the end, made some design tweaks, and created some new sails that were more spacey based on some sci-fi ships I saw online. I built these ones out of stained glass, and I love the ghost-like effect. And to add that extra oomph, I thought it'd be really cool to fit a large thruster at the back to fit with the sci-fi theme, and differentiate this from the ships in the overworld. This is a space galleon now, after all. To finish off, I added ropes to connect up the sails. I used glass panes for this section, and it definitely adds to the ghosty vibes. It's looking a little like a purple flying Dutchman. So with our end ship done, I placed them around the city, and you'll also find them scattered in the distant land.